Okay, all praise, glory, and honor is most certainly due to the Most High, the God of the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and peace to you in the name of his son, Jesus. Count it truly a blessing each and every single time that I can come before you to preach the word. Never do I count it as a light thing to do so. All right, brothers and sisters, I want to get right into today's lesson. And the message is entitled, Easter Has Nothing to Do with Christ. This is considered the most important festival in Christendom, hence the dumb. But this day, it's venerated. It's venerated as supposedly the day of the resurrection, and this day actually has nothing to do with Christ whatsoever. Peace to the brother. Peace to the brother Joshua and brother Isaiah. It's good to see you, brothers. Has absolutely nothing to do with Christ. And, it's one thing about those many who practice Christianity. Many are just in the dark. Matter of fact, let's just go to Revelation, the 17th chapter, and find out why you're in the dark. Revelation, the 17th chapter. Peace to you, MC Israel. It's good to see you. Revelation, the 17th chapter. And I want to pick it up in verse 1. Because here is where you get all this false doctrine from. Okay, it says in verse 1, and there came one of the seven angels which had the seven vials and talked with me, saying unto me, come hither, I will show unto thee the judgment of the great whore that sitteth upon many waters. Okay, so you have this whore. This is a spiritual whore. Whore is a harlot. This is spiritual harlotry, or spiritual whoredom, spiritual prostitution. Okay, now what does the waters refer to? Verse 14, in verse 15, it says, and he saith unto me, the waters which thou sawest where the whore sitteth are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues. Okay, so that's who the waters refers to. All right, so out of humanity came this whore. This is spiritual. This is symbolic. So the waters represent humanity. And when you see this woman, it's oftentimes referring to like a church, like Israel is his bride. It's referred to as a woman. That's the church. The church started in the wilderness. You read in Acts the 7th chapter. Okay, and so this one came, and this is a spiritual whore. We're gonna find out where she came from. But it says something about this whore. It says, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication. So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-colored beast full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. Okay, so now what about these 7 heads? Let's find out, just so we can understand where this is at, where this is located. Verse 9, it says, and here is the mind which hath wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sitteth. So what places on 7 mountains and 7 hills? That's Rome. So out of Rome, you have the Roman Catholic Church. This is the whore. Okay, and this is the whore in which you've given all this false doctrine, including Easter. Okay, now its origins we'll find are earlier than Christianity, today's Christianity, but we'll find out that it is perpetuating a particular system. It says, so he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness. I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-colored beast full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. And the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet color, decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, having a golden cup. And it says, in her hand full of abominations and filthiness of her fornication. Okay, so she has this cup. All right, this is all figurative language. This cup represents all the false doctrine. And the nations have been made drunk. See, the nations are drunk now. That's why so many churches that were able to do so, considering the pandemic, were full or half full, considering social distancing, or looking at Zoom or doing something in honor of Easter. Many of you grew up celebrating Easter. Easter is pagan to the core. We'll find that out. But this is, again, why am I reading this? Because this is where you get this doctrine from. So again, it said, the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet color and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, having a golden cup in her hand full of abominations and filthiness of her fornication. Verse 5, and upon her forehead was a name written, Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. Why Babylon? Babylon, if you were there for the last Wednesday night Bible study, we had a series on Catholicism started, and you would know that Catholicism carries on the mystery Babylonian spiritual system. Okay, this spiritual system that was started in Babylon is continued in Rome under the guise of what today people call Christianity. It's today's Christianity, but it's not truly about Christ. It only has that as a veneer. You wipe the veneer off, and you can go all the root traces all the way back to Babylon. All right, so that's where you get all this false doctrine from, because we'll find very easily and very simply, with some basic math, that Jesus didn't die on Good Friday and rise Easter Sunday. Let's go to Matthew 26 chapter and find out when he did die. This is Matthew 26 chapter and verse 1. And it came to pass, when Jesus had finished all these sayings, he said unto his disciples, you know that after 2 days is the feast of the Passover, and the Son of Man is betrayed to be crucified. See, he is the Passover lamb. He came and died on the Passover. That's not by coincidence. So they had to come up under the blood of the Passover, so we must come up under the blood of the Passover. We just had Passover. Okay, we're commanded to keep the Passover. We're commanded to keep the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Okay? That's what we're supposed to do. And people say, well, no, this is under the new covenant. You don't even know what the new covenant is. New covenant, he said, he made it with the same people. He said, I'm going to put my laws in their heart. See, it's in your mind. So it's in you. So that's the new covenant. And that's when he came to shed his blood for the new covenant. Right? Now, he died on the Passover. When did he rise? When did he rise? Matthew the 28th chapter. This is verse 28 and verse 1. It says, in the end of the Sabbath, as it began to dawn toward the first day of the week, came Mary Magdalene and the other Mary to see the sepulchre. And behold, there was a great earthquake, for the angel of the Lord descended from heaven and came and rolled back the stone from the door and sat upon it. Okay, and then we read here in verse 5, it says, and the angel answered and said unto the women, fear not ye, for I know that ye seek Jesus, which was crucified. He is not here, for he is risen. As he said, come see the place where the Lord lay. Now, we know he died on the Passover. And we know that when they came in the end of the Sabbath, okay, dawning towards a new day. So you'll see Sabbathon in certain places. In the Greek, he was gone. Okay, well, how do we know that he didn't die Good Friday and rise Easter Sunday? Okay, let's read something else here. This is Matthew the 12th chapter. Matthew the 12th chapter. And here we see the sign that was given. And in this sign given shows us that he didn't die Good Friday and rise Easter Sunday. Matthew the 12th chapter and verse 38. It says, then certain of the scribes and of the Pharisees answered, saying, Master, we will see a sign from thee. But he answered and said unto them, an evil and adulterous generation seeketh after a sign. And there shall no sign be given to it, but the sign of the prophet Jonas. For as Jonas was 3 days and 3 nights in the whale's belly, so shall the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. 3 days and 3 nights. You can't get 3 days and 3 nights from Good Friday to Easter Sunday with old math, with new math, with any kind of math. Simply cannot do it. Okay? Now, let's go to another place in the Gospels and see how people will try to take certain portions of the Bible to substantiate They're falsehood. This is John the 19th chapter and let's pick it up in verse 31. Verse 30, actually. It says, when Jesus therefore had received the vinegar, he said, it is finished. And he bowed his head and gave up the ghost. But what day was this? We just read in Matthew the 26th chapter, verses 1 and 2, that he died on the Passover, right? So, and we're going to verify this, but we're going to see the okie doke that's been trying to be played, that people are trying to play. Verse 31 says, the Jews, therefore, because it was the preparation that the body should not remain upon the cross on the Sabbath day, for that Sabbath day was an high day, besought Pilate that their legs might be broken and that they might be taken away. So some would say, well, he died on Good Friday because the day before coming up was a Sabbath. No, that's falsehood. Let's read carefully. The Jews, therefore, because it was the preparation. What's the preparation? The preparation is the Passover. What are you preparing for? The Feast of Unleavened Bread. Because according to God's calendar, the Most High's calendar, the Passover is on the 14th day of the first month, Abib. Okay? And on the 15th day of the first month, the very next day, is the Feast of Unleavened Bread. You can read that in Exodus, the 12th chapter. You can also continue to read Exodus 13, and you can also read Leviticus, the 23rd chapter. Okay? So that's the preparation. So the high day that was coming was the Feast of Unleavened Bread. And so they didn't want him on the cross then. But people have come here to say, well, it was Friday because the Sabbath was coming the next day. Well, he calls his annual feasts Sabbaths as well. Let's go, just to verify this, let's go to Leviticus, the 23rd chapter. And I'm going through this. This might be elementary for some, but for others, it may not be. Certainly it wasn't for me. I grew up, I hadn't not considered these things growing up in the Sunday church. Leviticus, the 23rd chapter. And I want to pick it up at verse 4. Well, verse 1. It says, and the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them concerning the feast of the Lord, which ye shall proclaim to be holy convocations, even these are my feasts. 6 days shall work be done, but the 7th day is the Sabbath of rest and holy convocation. Ye shall do no work therein. It is the Sabbath of the Lord in all your dwellings. These are the feasts of the Lord, even holy convocations, which you shall proclaim in their seasons. And the 14th day of the first month at even is the Lord's Passover. And on the 15th day of the same month is the feast of unleavened bread unto the Lord. 7 days ye must eat unleavened bread. And the first day ye shall have an holy convocation. Okay. It says, you shall do no servile work therein. So that was the very next day that was coming forth. Okay. That's the very next day that was coming forth. Now, let's read another place here, just so we understand what's going on. And peace to the brother Lawson and Khalil, brother Khalil and brother Nicodemus and brother you. Peace to you. Let's pick it up. Let's see. One second. Let's pick it up in Psalms 104th division, maybe. And let's go to, let's see. Actually, hold on one second. Let me find it first. And that's one thing about it. When you're telling the truth, you have to be right and exact. You have to be right and exact when you're telling the truth. When you're making up things and lying, you can just say any and everything that you want to say. And it doesn't matter. You can make it up as you go along. Okay? That was 95 first. Let me make sure. Give me 1 second. There's a couple places we can read it, but I'll read it here. Let's pick it up and let's just do it here. Let's pick it up in Ezekiel. And see what he gave him. Well, we can read Ezekiel 20 and verse 12. It says, in verse 10, it says, wherefore I caused them to go forth out of the land of Egypt, and brought them into the wilderness, and gave them my statutes, and showed them my judgments, which if a man do, he shall even live in them. Okay. Then he says, well, also I gave them my Sabbaths to be a sign between me and them, that they might know that I am the Lord that sanctify them. But the house of Israel rebelled against me in the wilderness. They walked not in my statutes, and they despised my judgments, which if a man do, he shall even live in them. And my Sabbaths they greatly polluted. Okay, so Israel didn't keep them properly. Okay. But he gave them his Sabbaths. Let's go back to Leviticus 23. And let's pick it up. Let's see. Give me 1 second. Actually, no, that's not the right place. Forgive me, I'm looking for something specific, and it's gonna annoy me. But nevertheless, I have to keep looking for it. Now, let me progress on. Let's go to John the 4th chapter. The point's been made. John the 4th chapter. John the 4th chapter and verse, I want to pick it up in verse 22. Because one thing about it is you can't worship God any kind of way you want to. Okay? It can't just be you do what you want to do. And that's another thing in Christianity. When people will concede, well, Jesus was not born on December 25th. Okay, well, Easter has pagan origins. However, we want to do it in the spirit. This is how we're going to worship God. Now, such a thought is asinine when you really think about who the Most High is. You're talking about the one who created all things through his Son. You're talking about a perfect being. He gave us specific things to do. Now, that wouldn't go over. That kind of thinking wouldn't even go over amongst your parents. If they give you specific instructions and you say, well, I'm going to do it my way, there's going to be a problem when they get home. Okay? So it is with the Lord. All right? So it is with him. He gave, and a prime example of this is Uzzah. When David and days of King David, they were moving the Ark of the Covenant. And what happened? They were moving the Ark of the Covenant, and they put it on a new cart, and the oxen stumbled that was pulling the cart, and Uzzah reached his hand forth to steady the ark, and the Lord struck him dead. That doesn't sound like a big thing, but when you read the instructions on how to transport the Ark of the Covenant, it was supposed to be carried on staves that were borne on the shoulders of the Levites. And David realized, they were afraid, but then David realized, this hasn't been done in the proper order. You see, and that's what people need to realize when it comes to the Most High. You have to do it according to what He said. This is John, the 4th chapter, in verse 22. He's talking to the woman at the well. He says, "You worship, you know not what. We know what we worship, for salvation is of the Jews." You have to do what He gave unto Israel. He gave them His laws, His statutes, His commandments. He showed them how to worship Him. And that's what you are supposed to follow. Okay, and this is what He's expounding and telling the woman. This is what He's telling the woman at the well. Okay, that's what He's telling her. So now, let's pick it up again at verse 23. He says, or at verse 24 actually. He says, "God is a spirit, and they that worship Him must worship Him in spirit and in truth." Okay, so you have to worship God in spirit and in truth. It can't just be what you want it to be. It can't just be. You have to. And what is the truth? Okay, that's the question. What is the truth? He tells you in John the 17th chapter, "Sanctify them through thy truth. Thy word is truth." He tells you in the 119th division of Psalms that his commandments are the truth. Okay? So that's what truth is. Okay? Truth is not just what you say it is. It's not just what I say it is. His word is truth. His commandments are the truth. Okay? So, what's the truth? The truth is He didn't die on Good Friday and rise Easter Sunday. The truth is you can't get 3 days and 3 nights on Good Friday, from Good Friday to Easter Sunday. More like He died on a Wednesday and then rose on the Sabbath. That's what happened. The Passover fell on a Wednesday that week. He rose on the Sabbath. Okay? Now, some will say, well, what about Easter being in the Bible? Well, the word in English is Easter, but now let's go look at that clearly and we'll find out something here, because people will come here. This is Acts of the Apostles chapter 12 and verse 1. It says, "Now about that time Herod the king stretched forth his hand to vex certain of the church, and he killed James the brother of John with the sword. And because he saw it pleased the Jews, he proceeded further to take Peter also. Then were the days of unleavened bread." Now we read earlier, you had a Passover, then you had a feast of unleavened bread. 14th day of the first month of the evening is the Lord's Passover. The 15th day of the first month is the feast of unleavened bread unto the Lord. Okay, so then it says in verse 3, well, it says, "He killed James the brother of John with the sword, and because he saw it pleased the Jews, he proceeded further to take Peter also. Then were the days of unleavened bread. And when he had apprehended him, he put him in prison and delivered him to 4 quaternions of soldiers to keep him, intending after Easter to bring him forth to the people." Okay, so now you could say Easter, but the word there is Pascha, which means Passover. That's what that means. So, and some will say, well, it still said Easter, even if it did say it, and it meant Easter, the festival of Christians. What does that have to do with you observing it in truth? Because Easter has absolutely nothing to do with Christ. And you know that because look at what goes on Easter. Think about some of the things that go on Easter. Think about the Easter egg hunts. Think about eggs. Eggs represent fertility. I'm going to read something to you. I'm going to read something to you from this book, The Pagan Origins of Christian Holidays. This is a book I wrote some time ago, and it touches upon where you can get the origins of this from, this practice, okay? Now it says on page 39 of Easter, and it's entitled Ishtar or Ishtar. It's under sexual rituals in honor of Ishtar, Easter. In Babylonian In Babylon, like many other ancient pagan cultures, human sexuality was associated with fertility in nature. Temples were erected in Ishtar's honor, and sexual ritualism was associated with the worship of her. Some scholars attest that each year, around the time of the spring equinox, the marriage of Ishtar and her consort Tammuz was reenacted. So Ishtar, Astarte, Ashtoreth, these are the same pagan fertility goddess. This ceremony consisted of a sexual ritual between the king of Babylon and the high priestess of Babylon. It was believed that this union would ensure plentiful crops. Sacred prostitution was also practiced in honor of Ishtar. Herodotus, that's the so-called father of history, a Greek historian who wrote the histories, that's a classical work, describes this lascivious act as follows. Quote, the foulest Babylonian custom is that which compels every woman of the land to sit in the temple of Aphrodite or Ishtar, again, same goddess, and have intercourse with some stranger once in her life. Many women who are rich and proud and disdain to mingle with the rest drive to the temple in uncovered carriages drawn by teams and stand there with a great retinue of attendants. But most sit down in the sacred plot of Aphrodite with crowns of cord on their heads. There is a great multitude of women coming and going. Passages marked by a line run every way through the crowd, in which the men pass and make their choice. Once a woman has taken her place there, she does not go away to her home before some stranger has cast money into her lap and had intercourse with her outside the temple. But while he casts the money, he must invite you in the name of Melita. It does not matter what sum the money is, the woman will never refuse, for that would be a sin. Again, that's according to them. The money being by this act made sacred, so she follows the first man who cast it and rejects no one. After their intercourse, having discharged her sacred duty to the goddess, she goes away to her home, and thereafter there is no bribe, however great, that will get her. So then the women that are fair and tall are soon free to depart, but the uncomely, meaning unattractive, have long to wait because they cannot fulfill the law. For some of them remain for 3 years or 4. There's a custom like this in some parts of Cyprus. Okay, and there are also homosexual male prostitutes known as Asinu, Goru, and Pulu. These devotees of Ishtar were castrated and engaged in lifelong service of men in honor of Ishtar. This is what's going on in honor of this pagan goddess. Easter eggs. This is intermingled symbols and practices of pagan worship. In addition to the name, the symbols associated with the Easter festival also reveal its pagan influence. In paganism, the mundane egg is symbolic of the manifestation of the cosmos. The egg is also a symbol of rebirth that is associated with the various pagan deities. The ancient Egyptians hung eggs in their temples. Said the Egyptian god of time supposedly laid an egg at the time of the great one of the dual force. In the ancient Greek Orphic tradition, the primordial hermaphroditic god hatched from an egg and then created the deity. Among the Phoenicians, the egg of the demon embraced the mundane egg. The Chinese believed that when the earth was in total darkness, the Pun Ku Wong sprang from an enormous egg as a human being with tremendous powers. According to one Babylonian legend, an egg containing Ishtar fell from heaven and landed in the Euphrates River. This cosmic egg of wondrous size was pushed to shore by a fish and incubated by a dove. In Babylon, we also find the roots of Easter egg hunts. Colored eggs were also used in honor of Ishtar. And ancient pagans believed that finding Ishtar's egg in nature at the time of her rebirth would bring forth a blessing. In ancient Anglo-Saxon mythology, the fertility goddess Ishtar changed her bird into an egg-laying hare. These brightly colored eggs were given as gifts to children. After the rise of Christianity, the egg became a symbol of the tomb from which Christ was resurrected, and Christians continued the pagan custom of painting eggs during the festival of Easter. You ever thought about what eggs have to do with Christ? Nothing, but you constantly see the symbolism during the time of Easter. Hares, which are rabbits. It says in paganism, the rabbit is a sign of sexual fertility, fecundity, and the moon. A rabbit or hare has 4 to 8 litters each year. During its lifespan, a rabbit can potentially produce up to 600 offspring. It was believed that hares had sex indiscriminately and were thus associated with the fertility goddesses in whose honor sexually wanton acts were committed. Rabbits were mainly associated with Ishtar and Aphrodite. They were sacrificed on the altars, and even the consumption of rabbit meat was believed to remedy infertility well into the 17th century. 2 cures for infertility read, this is from Lady's Companion or the English Midwife. This is the publication of 1671. It says, quote, take of the slime that a hare will have about his mouth when he eateth mallows, and drink it in wine 2 hours after lie with your husband, or give to the woman without her knowledge the womb of the hare to eat, or burn the same to powder and give it to her in wine. Again, they thought this would bring forth fertility. The hare, like Easter, associated with the moon. This nocturnal creature carries her young for a month, the length of the moon cycle. A new moon was considered masculine and the vanishing moon feminine. It was once believed that both the hare and the moon had the ability to change their sex. Aristotle and Pliny both believed that the hare was male one year and female the next. The hare was also a symbol of pagan folklore because it was said that the dark patches on the moon looked like leaping hares. I'm gonna skip around because there's other things like new clothing. You get new clothing. Many of you got new clothing. I got new clothing during Easter growing up, and that was during the spring. That was a pagan ritual. All right. Easter lilies. Lilies are among the flowers associated with the Easter season. The lily is also revered by pagans. Pagans revered the lily and considered the flower to be a phallic symbol because it resembled the reproductive organ. Easter ham. It is a tradition amongst many Christians to eat a ham on Easter. Many of you did that. Why? This custom may in fact have arrived from Babylon. According to legend, Tammuz was killed by a wild boar on a hunting expedition, and Ishtar descended into the underworld to rescue him. In her absence, he died along with most vegetation. Each year, a pig was consumed by the devotees of Ishtar and Tammuz to avenge the death of their sun god. That's what you read. When you read in the scriptures about Tammuz, weeping for Tammuz, the same thing. Okay. You read that in Ezekiel. You read it, how they worship the sun. Now, Easter was not celebrated by early quote-unquote Christians. Let's read this here. This is on page 48 of the same book. Easter was not a festival that was observed by the apostles or the early Christians. Even Tertullian asks, if the apostles set aside all reference to days and months and years, why do we celebrate Pascha in the first month of each year? There is no evidence that Easter was observed in the New Testament. Easter in relation to Christ was not celebrated until several hundred years after his death. It was common practice of the Catholic Church to overtake the pagan days and rites in order to lure in the pagans. The pagan Sunday was transformed into the Christian Sunday. Sunday and Easter are identical because Sundays, from the Catholic perspective, are simply the reoccurrence of the Easter Resurrection Sunday. The obvious problem with such a position is that stamping the name of Jesus on a pagan day does not in reality make that day quote-unquote Christian or holy for that matter. On the contrary, those who observe Easter are simply continuing the pagan customs of antiquity. Okay, and with that, brothers and sisters, so I'm a prayer that you were edified.